Welcome back, everyone, to another Spoiler Room episode. I am your host, Mark the Movie Man, and tonight, uh, I couldn't hold it in. I had to do an episode, and I was lucky enough to find at least one crew member to hop in to help talk about this at last minute. And we're talking Kubo and the Two Strings, and I'm joined tonight by the lovely Andrew Shearer. Hello, Andrew.
Hey Mark, hey, it'll be Mark and the one string. I'll be the string.
You'll be the one string. You're a full guitar in my book. So
Hey, thanks, man. I could be G string. I could be any kind of string.
I think no one would mind being a G string. But tonight, it is Kubo and the Two Strings came out a couple weeks ago now, a stop motion animation film, and according to the IMDb, which actually has a fairly decent summary of it, is a young boy named Kubo must locate a magical suit of armor worn by his late father in order to defeat a vengeful spirit from the past. Directed by Travis Knight and brought to us by the studio who brought us such fun films as Paranormal, Coraline, and before this they did Box Trolls. I've been a fan of this studio for years, and let me tell you, I've seen the trailers, and I will admit this was probably one of my most anticipated films of the years. I know some people it wasn't, but Andrew, when you got done watching this, what thoughts ran through your mind with it?
I mean, Kubo and the Two Strings is just epic storytelling. You know, it's epic cinema. I mean, to me, it's beyond what would be like for family audiences, and it's now in the territory of people like Ray Harryhausen. I think what they're doing with animation is just historic.
Yeah, and the technology's there to help them make it even better. But you watch some behind-the-scenes footage of what went into this film, and it's just mind-blowing. I mean, I know watching it within the first 5 minutes, I forgot I was watching a stop-motion animation film. Your brain doesn't think, wow, this is animated. You're just watching the story because it was so engrossing. And I'll say this has probably got one of the most powerful opening lines in not just an animated film, but in a film in general that I've seen in quite some time. Wow, how'd you think about how this started, Andrew?
He's like, if you're gonna blink, do it now. That's so good. I mean, it lets you know that you're about to see something amazing. And coming from the '80s, like me, movies like The Never-Ending Story and The Dark Crystal, I mean, we were seeing a renaissance in film creativity, particularly for children. You know, special effects across the board, but definitely for kids. And if, like, you could take that line and put it in front of one of those movies and see just what kind of scale these people are working on, because I think the same could be said for either of those, you know? You could use that line to start either of those movies.
I could definitely see that used to open those both those, and the visuals for the opening. I mean, you saw the trailers, but it didn't really give a whole lot of the story away. So then you get that opening line, and you're like, oh man, things are really going to get real.
Yeah, they do.
And they do. I mean, we get that opening shot of the mom with the guitar. You know, I forgot the name of the instrument, but and she's facing this wall of water, and man, it was just such a powerful visual. I was like, okay, we're in for a ride on this, and you are. And some of the subjects that came up in here, I thought, were actually really surprising, namely with Kubo's mom.
Yeah.
Did you get that feeling they were kind of addressing the idea of a child taking care of a parent with a mental illness?
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's kind of like in Zootopia in that way. It kind of trips you up and you go like, whoa, wait a minute here. These people are like actually tackling some big stuff, but not in such an, Pixar, every time they do that, it's always so on the nose. You know, everything's always so telegraphed and spelled out for you exactly what they're doing. You know what I mean? But with what I felt with Zootopia and this one, they were both, it was just like they told a good story, but they threw in stuff that you're like, damn. You know, they're very adult, but the movie doesn't play adult necessarily. It's very smart the way they wrote that. And of course, I'm a big fan of female-centric storytelling. So for Kubo's mother to be such a powerful image, that made me really happy to see that.
Well, it was just an interesting contrast. I mean, that was the first moment, and there were many of those throughout this film that just made me sit back for a moment and just went, "Whoa!" Because we open with her, and she's powerful and used her magic to, separate the water, and she saved, her boy who lost his eye to his grandpa, and we're not quite sure why at that point. And then we see Kubo older, and he comes in, and suddenly his mom is like in this kind of vegetative trance at first, which we come find out later why she's a night person because she's a night spirit. But just that where we saw her with full power, and then all of a sudden we see her kind of reduced to just the kind of comatose state she was in, and Kubo taking care of her. That contrast, and you didn't expect it. It's just like, wait, this isn't how these stories normally play out.
Yeah, and we make it sound complex, but it actually doesn't feel that way when you're watching it. What Mark
Mhm.
is talking about, listener, is the waves in which Kubo kind of hits you, not just as you're watching it, but a lot of time after you watch it. It's the kind of thing that really sticks in your head.
It does, and the imagery in here, and I think that has to do partly because of the stop motion animation. And people say, well, you do plan it out with everything with the CGI full superhero movies and that, but I think with stop motion animation, you have a little extra planning for every shot because of the work involved to make that shot happen. Each one seems very thought out and picked, and I kind of like that because it's just so detailed. It captures you and it sticks with you, and there's so much going on there. You're like, wow, they took care. I think that's what it is. They took care in the storytelling in this film, which is basically a basic hero's journey, you
Yeah.
know, but there's more to it than that. And you don't expect that. And how'd you feel about how they handled the magic? I thought it was interesting how he's able to make, which was a great sequence when he's telling a story with these
Or
origami figures that he can make by playing music. How'd you feel they handled the magic in here?
it was just blowing my mind, like from moment to moment, because here is a stop motion animated movie, but things are animated within the movie. Like you have this paper that comes to life, and there are so many original images that you're seeing. It's just, it's really kind of you kind of almost need to see it again as soon as it's over, because the first time you watch it, you're half just being blown away by what you're seeing, because like you said, you do kind of start to take for granted that it's stop motion because it's so smooth and so great and so perfect. But anytime you stop to think, holy crap, this is stop motion, you almost, you know what I mean? It's almost just like you're watching someone do magic, but the fact that anyone made this with their hands is also magical.
Yeah, well, it always surprises me, especially when they get stop motion things to fly through the air. I mean, I was astounded at how they did it. And I understand, compositing and moving the equipment out of the way and everything, but still looking at it on screen, you forget that because I first saw that with, especially when they did Nightmare Before Christmas many
Yeah.
moons ago. They had Jack in the sky and jumping from tombstone to tombstone. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. This is supposed to be stop motion, and he's doing these things. And in here, they take it tenfold to where they're just doing things that, when you step back and go, wait, that was stop motion. They did that. Holy, it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
especially the fight scenes in here.
Yeah,
Um, I thought those were really well choreographed.
it's like you're watching a kung fu movie. I mean, they really have that old school, not even necessarily old school. You could apply some Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon to some of this stuff. I mean, it's not a contemporary story, and there's such a influence of styles there, but it was if you're just like a fan of martial arts movies, like martial arts epics, Kubo would do you pretty solid, I think.
Oh, I think so. And the fight scenes go longer than you might expect too from a stop motion animation film.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy some of the stuff they do in here. But yeah, the paper magic, I love that concept. And for me, I didn't mind. I know My oldest son really liked it, but he said that he would have liked to see a little more definition within the rules of how the magic worked. What do you think about it? Because they don't really establish, the limits of either Kubo's power throughout this whole thing, or the limits of the magic. We're just kind of dropped into this world and not given all the details of how things work. Does that work for you? You think, or do you think you need some more definition?
It depends on kind of like the way you're wired and what you're into. I really don't care about explanations. In fact, it kind of having the mystery stripped away by either explanations or a lot of time taken up on the rules and things like that, or set or world building. I may have even mentioned that on the show before. I'm not interested in that at all. I'm not a big fan of the contemporary fantasy that's all about world building. I don't really like that. I can take a fantasy on face value, and whatever's happening, I go, okay, that's a thing he can do. Okay, that's something that happens here. You know what I mean? I believe in whatever reality they set forth, and I don't start asking questions as things are going.
Yeah, I didn't either, but I can see how it might, some people are want looking for more of that, but for me, I love being dropped into that world. I mean, anyone following into my reviews, I'm huge on visuals. I think if a film entertains me visually because it is an art, I think, that's fine. People joke, but I always go back to like Sucker Punch, just to mention it, on how it's not really explained. You're just dropped in and given these fantastic visuals, and in here you're not really given the rules of the magic, but you don't really need them to. You just need to sit back and enjoy the story, I think. And you're still given some world building through the visuals, though. They don't do it through exposition or anything, but you can pick up some things on the environments people are in, the characters are in, and everything. So I enjoyed, I enjoyed that. I thought they built a world they drop you in, and kind of like Mad Max Fury Road, you're not really given the defined rules of the world, but you don't really need them
No,
to
I mean you're not reading a
survive.
book. It's the
Mhm.
rules of film is show don't tell. You know,
Yeah.
so but just show me what you're talking about.
And that moves us to some of these characters I want to talk about, because this year seems to be, I don't know if someone woke up for making kids stories, but a number of our kids stories now seem to have gone and not so afraid to go to darker or more mature places than, say, kids stories in the past, as well as not talking down to kids, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I felt this story didn't. Just like I thought Pete's Dragon, while the story wasn't that deep, it covered a lot of heavier things and wasn't afraid to go to some places and treat kids with kid gloves.
yeah. No, I have a big problem with the way family films are done now because it didn't really hit me until I was a parent and started seeing a lot more of them than I used to. That they really a lot of times like haven't figured out this. Well, adults are making cartoons. Adults are making family films. Kids are not writing them. You know, kids are not the producers. All the creative people behind family films are grown-ups. So in that regard, they got to get a handle on how they are communicating and what they're communicating. And as much as people love Inside Out, for example,
Hmm.
I thought that movie went way off the mark. I'm like, good dude, Pixar, if you just want to write like a drama or something, you go do that and put that movie out for somebody else. This stuff to me, it's not pushing the boundaries of what animated film can do. It's pushing the boundaries of what animated film should do.
Hmm.
And I think what you're talking about, because Pete's Dragon to me is sublime. It
Right.
was the way they handled it was perfect, and the way that Kubo handled it is perfect too. Because you're what you want from a family movie, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is to get older and start appreciating on other levels. So a kid who's 3 can sit there and watch it and go, "Whoa, cool!" But then when a kid who's 10, 13, 25, 40, you know what I mean? They can still be like, "I still love that movie. It does something for me other than nostalgia." I can throw on uh, something like the Dark Crystal, and still just it is still such a heavy experience because while some of it was a little mature and some of it was a little scary, it still captivated me when I was young, and it kind of always will.
Yeah, same with me. I don't mind a kids movie that's not afraid to go to some places, and Kubo is definitely one of those. I mean, it covers subjects, but it moves in, as you said, it moves in so smoothly that a younger kid may not pick up on it, but then when they get older, they'll watch it and go, "Oh, that's what's going on here."
Yeah.
Before, it's just a talking monkey, but which I kind of predicted right away who the monkey was, who is voiced by Charlize Theron, who in 2 years has played two of my favorite female characters on screen. Last year was Furiosa, and this year was the monkey. Did you suspect right away that the monkey? Yes, this is a spoiler. The monkey was the mom.
No, not at all.
Really?
No, I wasn't thinking it, man. I was just
Mhm.
kind of going with it, you know.
See,
I didn't suspect it at all, but it made me so happy because another sticking point of mine with family movies is the way that they do away with the parents in every story. How do they do that so the young protagonists have to go on the journey or the adventure alone? And oftentimes they will do something traumatic with the parents. A lot of times they'll kill them or have them be separated, or you know what I mean. It's really like it's screwy, and sometimes it really bothers me. The Good Dinosaur was to me fucked up the way that they did it. I didn't like that at all, and they flash back to it in case it didn't traumatize you enough the first time. And even Finding Dory, there is a portion of that film where everything is telling Dory your parents are dead. She goes
mhm,
all this way, and they're like, "Oh yeah, no, they're dead." And you're like, "Well, fuck you." You know, it's just not cool. So when it comes to Kubo, the fact that her mom and dad were with her the whole time, I love that.
mhm.
Because why can't you be that creative with all this other shit?
Yeah, I loved that bit too. I kind of suspected the monkey early on that was the mom. Didn't expect Beetle, who was voiced by Matthew McConaughey, who I think this is one of his first voice acting
The
jobs,
first, if I'm not mistaken.
or the first as Beetle. He was hilarious as Beetle. I did not expect that, and yeah, you're right. When it did though get revealed, I was like, that hit me right in the feels. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, that's awesome. I'm like,
Yeah, and they even did a little kind of spectral versions of them, kind of Return of the Jedi style, you know?
oh yeah, definitely. At the end there, you definitely had the Return of the Jedi feel. But yeah, Kubo I thought was awesome too, voiced by Art Parkinson from Game of Thrones. Most people may remind him of. I thought he did really well too to convey the emotion in that. I mean, again, I think the voice acting is so good, you forget these are animated, not live beings in this movie.
Yeah.
Because there's so much emotion in the voice acting. How'd you feel about the voice acting with this?
I mean, I'm a big fan of that stuff. Like, that's pretty much my dream job is to
Mhm.
do voice work and animation and stuff. I would just love to do that. And, you know, unfortunately, well, I guess fortunately for the movies, because it does help them sell it, celebrities are all over it.
Mhm.
It's weird to think about. There was a time when that wasn't the case, but pre Aladdin, I think, maybe, that was a big deal that Robin Williams was the voice of the genie. A
Oh
lot of
yeah,
people
that
don't know
was.
that, but prior to that, big stars weren't being the leads in animated films. But I think, it does add something that they've got all like that acting training and stuff. But to me, Kubo especially, what I love about Kubo's voice specifically, of course, I love the monkey. Of
Yeah.
course, I love Beetle. But Kubo was neat because it was kind of not super masculine or super feminine, you
Mhm.
know? And I love that about that because a little girl or a little boy could watch Kubo and I think identify with them because I didn't feel like there was anything like inherently gendered about Kubo, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it just felt like a kid, not
Yeah.
a boy or girl. It was just a kid, and the voice too isn't too kid-like to where it's going to annoy a lot of people because it's so young sounding, but it wasn't too old sounding either.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I really like the portrayal of Kubo's voice in here, and everybody does well. I tell you, I I've watched a lot of horror films. You watch a lot of horror films, and Rooney Mara, who voices the sisters.
Hmm.
Those are some of the creepiest characters I've seen in recent years
Yeah.
in any movie. How'd you feel about them sisters?
They're scary, man, because Leica, their first movie was Coraline. You
Oh,
want to talk about scary stuff for kids. Paranorman is scary ish, but it's more of a horror comedy. Actually, it's probably my favorite horror comedy of the last 10 years, to be perfectly honest with you. Definitely one of my favorite zombie movies ever made. But Coraline is straight up nightmarish because I don't know when was the last time you saw it, but Coraline has this tunnel in this little girl's house. And when she goes through the other side, it's like the bizarro version of her family. And they've
yeah.
got buttons for eyes. So they're just these black eyes. And her mother and father both transform. And the mom turns into like this freaking spider monster. It's just out of hell. And so, like, Leica can do that. Like, they can go there. There's frightening things in each of their films. In Box Trolls, I think the giant furnace,
Mhm.
that walking whatever thing, that was hellish. Um, but those two sisters, the witches, they are that is the scariest they have gotten since Coraline. They are just they are frightening. And there was one part where half the mask got busted off. And I
Yeah.
was like, dude, if the mask comes off and there's some kind of monster, I'm gonna bug out.
Well, when they first appear, and Rooney Mara did it really well. They call his name, and you hear that in the trailer, but the way they appear, I actually got chills. I'm sitting here going, man, this is a good horror scene
It
right
is,
here.
and it's very good, like Hong Kong bride with the white hair scene too.
Mhm. They're floating over the water, and then later on, we find out that they're badass fighters too. I
Yeah,
mean, the one with the sister fighting monkey, holy, you know,
it was
I
a
mean,
good fight.
those two just go at each other, and I loved it because it's here again we have a modern fight between two females that felt like a fight. It didn't feel like, oh, a fight between two females. I mean, these two go at it, and they use all the tools and everything. You know what I mean? Like, you see in a lot of still see in a lot of cinema, unfortunately, some fights are choreographed because they're female, so they choreograph them a certain way. But sometimes you get those fights that aren't, and this is one of those. I think it was just a straight up fight. It didn't matter gender.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's a big scene because everybody's kind of fighting somebody else, and
Mhm.
you don't think this is girl fight. You just think this is just another, it's conflict on top of conflict. They did it really well and didn't bother with. They just dispensed with all that crap and just made an action scene awesome.
Yeah, well, yeah, because there's a lot of creepy scenes. That's a kind of a creepy scene too, because Kubo's in the water with these big, huge eyes
Yeah,
that show up, and the eyes show you what you want while it sucks you into this mouth.
so freaking scary.
Oh, oh man, that creature design was just wild. What'd you think of that production design? I mean, the things that they came up with, like the really large skeleton, which was one of the largest stop motion things I guess ever used. I
Yeah.
mean, these villains didn't they actually feel like true bad guys?
Yeah, that's why I compared it to a Harryhausen or even a Jim Henson thing because this is stuff we have never seen before. And these would be formidable villains even if they were in a live action movie and these were animated. And once upon a time, that is kind of what was done. You think about like something like Jason and the Argonauts or Clash of the Titans, where they had a stop motion thing. And when I was watching Kubo, I was like, all right, so say this any of these, villain characters, the eyeballs, the grandpa, whatever. If you stuck this in one of those movies, they would be writing about it in history books, in terms of cinema and animation. I mean, they're perfect. They're very cinematic, and animation doesn't mean anything. They're just great characters.
They are great characters. I mean, sisters, like I said, for me, the ones that stuck out were the sisters. I was like,
Yeah.
they really stuck with me even after the film was done. I was like, I could still hear them calling his name, and I'm just like, wow. But
Uh,
you get a great sequence there with the skeleton, and what I liked is this is your hero's journey where they collect the pieces, but here I felt a little bit like there was some Indiana Jones influence because none of the pieces they went after was as straightforward as just grabbing the piece.
No, and that made it it's like not so video game like either. It made it really like an old school adventure. That was one of the many great choices they made.
Yeah, well, especially with the swords, and you think they found the right one, and suddenly the big skeleton comes up and it's got multiple swords in
In
its
the
head,
head, ah,
and
so cool.
and they're all trying to figure out which sword it is, and you've got some peril for your characters, which you kind of question: is anyone gonna, which one is it might not make it out of there?
Yeah.
And I like that. I like a film to where even though in the way back of your mind you figure that character is not going to die, 99% of your brain it's convinced you that one of these characters may not make it out of this ordeal. I think that shows excellence in the setup of just the scene in the film in general to make you forget, most part you got the little voice, but it gets drowned out by, oh crap, I hope he doesn't die. Knowing full
Yeah.
well he probably isn't, but
Yeah, it's not. I mean, that is yet another thing about family films is that at one point or another, no matter what kind of movie you're telling, you got to put the main characters in mortal peril. If they're a toy, if they're a puppy, it doesn't matter. But for some reason, something like Kubo, it makes sense of the mortal peril. I mean, that's the kind of story they're telling. It doesn't feel as out of place there. And some of the criticism of the film was that it was too intense or too scary. But I completely disagree because if that's true, then then the Jungle Book is Cannibal Holocaust. You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Well, that's another one that went to some darker places you didn't expect for a kids film.
it was
Uh,
rough. It was Jurassic Parkish by the end of that Jungle Book.
that film was, I mean, it was really good, but that was another one of those that it wasn't handling kids with kid gloves. And I think when I got out of Kubo, that's what the most was for me was I was like, wow, it felt like the old school 80s, Dark Crystal, Never Ending Story, Labyrinth type of thing where it it didn't it didn't make it dumb for the kids. It wasn't afraid to say, hey, we're not afraid to scare you a little bit, or we not aren't thinking you can't handle this. You,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, because I think kids can. And that's what's refreshing about a number of the kids' films this year, or family films, quote unquote, is that many of them, not all, some of them still, but uh, a number of them that stood out for me are ones that they're making a family film, but they're like, we're not afraid to go here. We know you can handle it, and we know that if you can't, you'll ask mom and dad, what about?
Oh yeah, dude. In BFG, one of the giants just straight up eats somebody, and I was like, whoa. Okay. I mean, that movie was very 80s in a lot of ways.
Oh, BFG was one of those as well. I don't think it went over as well with American audiences. And actually, even in this one, I think part of the reason I feel bad in saying this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think because it's not set in the U.S. or has a U.S. Western feel, that it puts more audiences off, that they're afraid either to go see that film, or they're just put off by it because, say, it doesn't take place in the U.S. or it's not the style of story that uh, they may be used to. Do you
Yeah,
think that might be part of it?
man. There's a lot of I mean, I've been thinking a lot about Kubo and why it was not a hit movie. Um, and there's a bunch of possibilities of why audiences just didn't run out to see it. I mean, on the one hand, you could go like, they don't know what this is. The trailers don't tell you what the movie's about. They don't recognize any of the characters. It doesn't look like other movies that we've seen. There's nothing familiar about it. And maybe it looks like, people with smaller kids might go, oh God, no, that looks too scary, whatever. You know what I mean? You're like,
Yeah.
but I really do think because you could take Kubo and say, this is some Japanese a stop motion movie and we dubbed it with Charlize Theron and McConaughey, you'd be like, okay, yeah, I buy that. This is a foreign film dubbed with the English. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
it could almost be seen that way. It is such a, so non-Western.
Well, you can definitely see. I think they were going for the Miyazaki influence on this
Yeah.
film. I think you can really see that from the world to the creatures they design and everything. They weren't trying to replicate it, but it was like it was similar to Pacific Rim, and that was Del Toro's kind of love letter to Godzilla. This
Mhm.
feels like a love letter to Miyazaki films in many
I mean, it
ways.
does. It does. It's got a lot in common with just like fantasy filmmaking of the past and adventure filmmaking of other places around the world. I just think Kubo is not a film necessarily for American audience, but I think Kubo is a film for a world audience. And what was neat about when I went to see it was I saw a lot of people there that were not white, and that was cool because it's like you don't ever think about it because of privilege. You think about, well, it's like, wow, look at all these other trailers before Kubo. A lot of these characters are white characters,
Hmm.
you know? And for representation, that's not very good. And I know Kubo was one of these movies that will get criticized for whitewashing, having American actors play Asian characters, this, that, and the other. But, the honest truth is that this is unusual, the way that they're doing this. Not unlike how Disney will do with Mona, I think, is the one that's getting ready to come out, where it's all like Hawaiian or Pacific or something like that. I'm not
Hmm.
exactly sure.
Yeah, it's Asian Pacific, I believe it is,
Yeah,
or Hawaii. Yeah.
but they'll still be a Western style humor and all that other stuff. This has a little bit of that, but I was sitting here thinking, like, all right, so Kubo costs somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60 million or something like
Hmm.
that, and it's gonna take a while for it to make that back here. I would have been really surprised, but when it hits the rest of the world, I'm hoping it'll do something, you know.
Yeah.
Hoping it'll maybe it'll be a kind of a hit the way that, like, because Warcraft apparently did awesome for him.
Hmm.
Um, but more
Well,
than likely, just be one of those movies that's like uh, gonna have to be discovered later, maybe.
and Pacific Rim was like that as well. It didn't do well domestically, but overseas it did phenomenal.
Yeah,
Uh, it made a lot because it it wasn't more of a Western tale. It was more of a world tale, and Kubo is like that too. The way it's story told in that, and for me, I found it refreshing.
yeah,
And for those of you out there, I'm going to just put a little of a side. There was a and this is going to come together. Trust me. Suicide Squad. There was critics slamming Suicide Squad. It got a whole low rating on Rotten Tomatoes before it came out, and made still huge bank at the box office. Regardless of what its budget is, it made huge bank at the box office. Don't care about what its budget was, but the money it took in on that opening weekend was amazing, and even the weekend after, and now the weekend after that. Kubo, on the other hand, has a huge rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got like 96%, I think it is, and 80 something, Metacritic or whatever, 83 on Metacritic, I think. And it's failing at the box office. So for those of you out there looking at, oh, the critic ratings, affect the box office, yeah, two examples right there where it doesn't. And it's, in this case, Kubo deserves a lot more love. And I know people on Facebook are probably tired of me talking about it, but I keep plugging it because you want original films. This is an original film.
yeah. No, it was funny though, is that, like, you're a film fan, you're a what they call a cinephile or whatever. That's not who drives the box office numbers up. It's the average moviegoer that drives the box office numbers up. And if you look at what is a big hit, it's never a surprise anymore. It's
Mhm.
very franchise driven, very brand driven. A lot of times something can be over marketed, under marketed, but most of the time people just they want the most sure, um, satisfying
Mhm.
experience when they go to the movies. and that is not it's not in line with originality and like risk taking. Those two things, you know what I'm saying, they don't go together. So if we sit and wonder, it's like, God, why is Kubo the most underperforming Leica release ever? You know, because they've slowly gone down. Like Coraline was actually, made
Mhm.
money. Paranorman kind of didn't. Box Trolls even less so. Right now, Kubo is its least successful film.
Yeah.
And you go like,
Well,
whoa, what's wrong with people? Don't they know? Like, well, it's so it's so slick for one thing. I don't think people even know it's stop motion.
well, there were a number of people who didn't. I mentioned online, I showed a video clip that someone shared of, the animators working behind the scenes. And I had at least a couple people go, "Oh, wait, it's stop motion."
Exactly. Well, let me ask you this, dude. Do you think it would have helped in the trailers if they would have promoted the fact that it was stop motion a little more by like pulling back and showing the animation a little bit, you know? I mean, not to the point where you think it might be a documentary instead of a cartoon, but showing like pushing that angle, that stop motion angle. Do you think that would have helped at all?
I think it would have helped a little because I think because CGI has gotten so much better, I honestly think a lot of people looked at the trailers and went, "Oh, it's a CGI cartoon film."
Yeah, just like the selling point not necessarily being the story as much, because no one I know really that saw the trailers for Kubo could have told me what it was about. I was
Yeah.
even very clear.
Mhm.
But instead, going like, starting with like a pair of hands on the model or the model moving around and stopping and pulling out and showing the studio and whatever, then the people who stop motion to you Coraline and Box Troll, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like sell it like that. Do you think that would have made a difference with people?
I think it would have drawn a number of more people who do, appreciate that film who may not have realized it was stop motion.
Yeah.
Because, when I saw the first trailer, I didn't realize it was really either. And then, I still wanted to see it. I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. Then I realized it was stop motion. Like, oh, now I really want to see it. So
Yeah.
I, I, I honestly think, yeah, that might be it, because, yeah, the story, you couldn't tell exactly what fully the story was, and I like that. But nowadays, that
People
people,
go they go
they
like,
want that. They want to know everything about the major plot of the film
well, they want to
before they
look
go
at
see it.
something and know what it is.
Right.
That's the easiest way I could tell you. They want to look at something and know what it is. So if you look at the big movies, Sausage Party, Suicide
Uh,
Squad, you
mhm.
can look at the freaking poster of Suicide Squad or see 10 seconds of the trailer, know exactly the movie that you're going to get. Same thing with Sausage Party, with a bunch of dirty mouth hot dog. That's easy to sell people. Kubo is
Yeah.
just not an easy thing to sell people. Doesn't matter that it's awesome, but you know, I don't think you could sell Fight Club to people now. There's plenty of things. The Crow, things
Yeah.
that we consider to be amazing films, that are very original films. People would not go see those.
No, I think you're right, and especially with Kubo, because the way this story plays out, even at the end, this ending to this film, I loved. And I know some critics kind of had a problem with it, but I loved this ending because Kubo got his armor. He's fighting, the Moon King, who's his grandfather, who we kind of found out why he took his eye, which there's more there that you actually have to think about for motivation than what is told, which might turn some people off. But then at the very end, we don't get the death of the villain, do we? We get something else.
Yeah, it was rad. There's like redemption there, and that's great to me because you have to think of what are we communicating to people that are watching these movies, and a lot of times what you're communicating is violence is the solution to stuff,
Mhm.
and revenge is something that you should be seeking as I guess a closure to a horrible thing, and so many stories boil down to that. But what you really hope is to have like forgiveness, redemption, uh, cool things like that, and those are stuff that you see in the Miyazaki films
Mhm.
because they are not about some weird ass biblical eye for an eye crap because that's not where they come from, you know? There's more going on there. You wanna have hope for everyone. You want to have uh, some sympathy for the bad guy without turning him into a blubbering whatever. Man, he goes from the most terrifying, real visceral threat,
Mhm.
scary, to just being a humble old dude.
Yeah, and then what I loved even more, it that was like a bang bang type of moment in this film. It was like Kubo, he got the spirits, which is an awesome sequence and some dialogue. Okay, they defeat the bad guy. Oh wait, he didn't kill him. He turned him into an old forgetful man. Oh, okay.
Mhm.
And then you get the townspeople who this guy just destroyed their town, go up to him and go, "Oh no, no, you're a kind man. You helped me with this. You helped me." And I'm like sitting there going,
Yeah,
wow, that's some next level shit right there.
yeah, because I mean, they should take them apart like roads or something, right?
You would think he'd be the abandoned guy, or they, Kubo would take him and the townspeople just walk off. And here, suddenly he goes from being this angry kind of guy who wants to destroy Kubo, since Kubo won't give in to his demands, to this scared, forgetful old man. And the community surrounds him and tells him he's actually a good person, rather than abandoning him and sending him to the shack at the edge of the woods,
Yeah,
as you might expect. And I was like, wow.
yeah. It's intense, man. What a great lesson. What a great way to tie it up.
Yep. And then at the very end too, we get that Return of the Jedi kind of moment. Kubo doesn't get his parents back at the end. They turn into spirits. He gets to say goodbye. But at the end, Kubo now is left with his grandfather, who is a forgetful old man who tried to kill him 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, it's his only family that's left because his mom does not survive.
Yeah, and that ending just stuck with me so much, and it because you and I both we watch a lot of film, and family films especially can tend to be a bit predictable. I mean, I hate to say it, but even Pixar films can tend to be a bit predictable for their ending. And this one, I did not see that resolution coming, and I already respected the film, and then when that happened, I got a total other level of respect
Yeah,
for the film, because I was like, wow, I would not have thought it was going to end that way, the way they built it up, and it was a beautiful way to end it, because it's a beautiful film. I mean, artistically, visually, this film is a piece of art, I think.
yeah, yeah. It is. It's gonna stand the test of time. It's like Leica's probably okay. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think they're gonna really stop making. I mean, like, what is it like? Nike owns it or something, and its son is the chief of it. The guy that, like, the CEO of Nike is his son runs Leica, I think.
I think so. Yeah, I think
Yes,
that's what it
something
is.
like that. Because
There's money there. So
yeah, so I think they're gonna be okay, you gotta appreciate kind of what they're doing and stuff. So they're building a really respectable library because we own all of their stuff. I'm just a fan of claymation from way back. Like,
mhm.
the history of Leica, it started out as Will Vinton Studios. He's got nothing to do with it now. It's totally changed. But Will Vinton was the California Raisins guy,
Yeah,
and for a while he was the only name in claymation. And truthfully, Leica is the only name in claymation now. And among the people that are making fantasy children's movies now that are bucking the popular trends of the CGI stuff, I want to say Leica and, like, maybe Tom Moore and Ghibli are the only ones that offhand I can think of that are really doing anything that you think in 40 years are going to still be just amazing films.
oh yeah, I agree. I mean, look at even I was talking to Scott Menzel a little bit about it, how Nightmare Before Christmas, when it came out, it actually didn't do that well at the box office. But it's a film that still is around. People still talk about. There's still new merchandise being made for that film.
Yeah, no, that
Um,
was a phenomenon. And part of it is that it's Tim Burton,
oh
and
yeah,
And because you think, on the other hand, you think of Roald Dahl, James the Giant Peach, and
Hmm.
Fantastic Mr. Fox. Those movies aren't, they don't have that Nightmare Before Christmas iconography, you know.
Right.
And one could say that Coraline was the most successful of Leica because that's a Neil Gaiman story.
Mhm.
So who the hell knows, man? Does Leica's next step need to be an adaptation of a previously published work?
It might, I think, in case, to pull possibly that familiar audience in, because yeah, I don't think I've been any wide release stop motion film. I don't think I've been disappointed in. I love each of them for their own reasons. And Kubo, yeah, it is a medium that does stand the test of time because of the way it's done. There's no exact age setting on what you're seeing,
Mm-mm.
versus CGI. Um, it's funny because I recently saw Jurassic Park in the theater, and that actually, outside of a number of scenes, that film actually holds up well. But that's because they used a lot more practical effects than what you thought. And here, you basically got Kubo, which is an entire movie of practical
No,
effects.
that's a good point to make. And Jurassic Park back then, because not every movie was full of those kind of effects, they took way more time on them than movies do now with CG and with any effect really. And so like what you kind of get is sort of like a cookie cutter, kind of like a soulless, weightless kind of thing, kind of a samey kind of thing, to where people now, I don't think they appreciate what goes into that, because they're just, it's in every movie. It's so
Yeah.
commonplace. Stop motion is not. And Jurassic Park is great because they really took a lot of time doing those effects. They still look great, but dinosaur effects now and some other stuff like Jurassic World, I don't think the effects in Jurassic World are any better than Jurassic Park.
No, they aren't actually. And I was thinking back, that was kind of entering my head when I was watching Jurassic Park again on the big screen. They had one of those retro showings. We drove actually an hour to go see it just
It's
because
totally worth it, dude.
and it was because watching it that holds up. And I was thinking of Jurassic World, and I'm going, that one's not going to hold up as much as this one because of the sheer volume of CGI. Now I know they use some practical in that too, but there's a lot more CGI in Jurassic World than there
Yeah.
is in Park. And when you watch Jurassic Park, I mean, the scene with the T-Rex when it first comes out of the, and I know that part was CG, but a good chunk of it too was real, where it's up close sniffing the characters in that's all real, or it's pushing down on the car on top of the kids. That's real. And in this, in Kubo, to bring it back to Kubo, you get that here. These characters have weight to them. They have a real feel to them visually, and that sticks with you, and that puts it more ageless, I think, than having whatever the newest CGI is
No, and it
that
makes it more
they do.
magical and adds to the fantasy to know that, this wasn't something that just popped out of a computer.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a sequence where they were doing it. It's online of how they shot this fight scene on the boat made of leaves
Oh
and
God,
paper,
so
and that
cool.
that is so cool how they did that. And I'm like, just knowing that. I mean, I already appreciated the film, but there's so many layers of things that I appreciate with Kubo, and that's why I've been just talking it up. And I'm sure people are probably tired of me bringing it up, but I'm like, we need to support more films like this because we don't get them that often. And part of the reason is the marketing. We've talked about that already. But to give you an example, I talked to the theater manager, and I talked to the theater manager here afterwards, and I was like, I loved Kubo. It's a shame. I go, they know me there. It's like my second home. So I just was frank with her, and I said, it'd be, I wish they would have showed it on the big screen, on the mega screen. And she goes, yeah, well, I guess it shows kind of that our bookers know the film because, it wasn't doing very well. So that's why we had it on the smaller screen, because they figured it wouldn't do any very well. And I didn't
Yeah,
say it, I didn't say anything, but I'm thinking to myself, talk about limiting the potential of a film because your predictable numbers or whatever are saying, you're just looking at the numbers and going, well, it's not going to do. When if you put a movie like Kubo, it deserves to be on a mega screen.
Yeah, yeah. No, and in 3D also,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, it's focus features. It's not a major distributor, what I'm saying? It's not one of the big studios, so it's just not going to get the thing. But I tell you this, though, something we haven't mentioned is that all of Leica's movies have been nominated for Oscars.
Yep, that they have, and I'm really I'm uh, if they don't, I will set fire to the Oscar statue, uh, because because as far as animated films go, I mean, and this has been a great year for animated films as well. We talked about Zootopia already. That
Yeah, it's
was
amazing.
another, animated Chinatown. Yeah,
Yeah, so good. And the not to go completely away from Kubo, but there's a scene in Zootopia where they hit upon this whole other city within the city that's for smaller animals.
Mhm.
Holy crap! Who thinks of that?
I know. But
Fabulous.
yeah, well, and then you had it with Kubo. You had the curse with the beetle. The guy being changed into a beetle. He wasn't killed. He was changed into a beetle, and a whole moon mythology. It's just like, wow, people are. It's showing you. It gives you some hope that there's people out there coming up with these original ideas and able to get them to the big screen.
Yeah.
If anything, through animation, and that gives me hope, and I love that, because especially this year, it's on the whole been a good year for the family type films in general. Jungle Book and Pete's Dragon and Zootopia, and especially Kubo. It's like refreshing because you watch enough of them. I know the casual film goer does it, but if you watch enough of these, you start to see the pattern. Then these ones who break away from it stand out, and you've got to give them props. And it's just a shame that studios or producers or promotion PR folks or whoever they have for marketing don't always have the full confidence behind some of these original films that are better than any of the mass-produced multi-screen showing films that are out the same weekend.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
We're just not as a culture the kind that are flocking to go see stop motion. That's just kind of the way it goes. And so instead of trying to figure it out, I just go like, I'm glad Leica's making move. I'm glad someone's doing it, because you don't want it to be a lost art.
no, you don't, and you always get these ones that crop up, and all of it. I mean, Burton's last one, I loved Frankenweenie too, and there's for completely different reasons
Yeah.
of watching that one, but that's a decent one too. I mean, there's care put into these because these films take longer, and yeah, you're right. At least though, I have a feeling though more people will be sitting and talking about like Zootopia and especially Kubo. Kubo is probably going to be around a long time and still be watched by people, say long after, say, Jurassic World. Not so much, just because I think there's a timelessness to them, and it deserves your support. So go see Kubo. We're going to wrap it up here. Simple enough. If you haven't heard us gush over it, it is a simple fact. It deserves it because of, I know all films have work put into them, but this one, you get special films. You don't get films like this that often, that are not only a solid storytelling, great acting, but just a piece of art, I think, that deserves to be watched. But maybe I'm off on that. But
No, man, and I know you get frustrated when the movies you think are the coolest or other people seem to either not be paying attention or, everybody dislikes the one that you like and vice versa or whatever. But I would say, man, don't stress about that stuff.
nah.
Time will tell. If you
Mhm.
start looking back at some of the most important films and read the reviews that they got at the time, it's oftentimes a way different story.
Yeah, it is a different story, and no, I've gotten over that phase after after my superhero stint. No, I'm better on that now. But it just
No,
I
it's
am
frustrating. It's still
it,
frustrating.
it is, and and I'll talk about the films, and if people go see it, and then you won't hear me talk about it anymore. So, well, no, I'll still probably talk about it, but then I can talk about it with you like we
Yeah.
did tonight. So we'll wrap it up here. I hope everyone enjoyed our discussion of Kubo, and hopefully it makes you go see it if it's still at the theater, because it deserves the theater experience for a film like this, from the sound to everything about it. It is why I love film, is movies like this. So, Andrew, why don't you tell folks where they can find your stuff at when you're not gabbing about movies?
Oh man, when is that? When is that ever? Thank you seriously for doing this. It's cool. I'm
Mhm.
glad you decided to go ahead with it, even though I was the lone string on your instrument, as it were. If you like some weird homemade underground film, you could see the movies that my friends and I make at www.gonzorific.com. We have DVDs for sale there. Or if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can watch a couple of our films. May of the Dead and Very Scary are on there right now. On Amazon On Demand, we have Fake Blood, Mondo Gonzo, Pajama Nightmare, The Underground Cinema, and the latest one, Late Night Cable. Or if you just want to check out our YouTube channel, it's GONZO RIFFIC. There's tons of short films going back over 10 years worth of crazy crap.
Nice, 10 years worth. That's
More than
awesome.
that.
Or more than that.
Yeah.
And we're not, we did spoil everything about Kubo, so I leave this to you. You can go to specialmarkproductions.com, find our other episodes of the Spoiler Room. This one you'll find on Stitcher and iTunes. Please rate and comment and like us. But you notice the title is Kubo and the Two Strings, but the instrument he has three strings. So I'm going to play something a little different with this episode. If you feel like it, please email spoilerroom.smp@gmail.com, or comment on this video if you're watching the YouTube version. Let us know what you think the two strings actually are from Kubo after you go see it. I know what they are. I think Andrew does too. I loved that bit of how they worked it into it, of what the other two strings are. But I want to hear your thoughts on what you think the two strings actually are in Kubo and the Two Strings. So email us, comment on us here. Love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for your support. SpecialMarkProductions.com is where you can find all of our stuff. We thank you. And hope this wetted your whistle to make you go see Kubo. And say goodnight, Andrew.
Hey, good night, Andrew. P.S. The answer is the two strings are Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan.